Well, thank you very much for coming along today. Tell me, when did you first realise you had a gift for storytelling?
Don't know about a gift, but I knew I liked making up stories from when I was about 3 or 4. I played elaborate pretend games and sort of sat and muttered in corners and made up all sorts of stories for my dolls and teddies and everything, and played many imaginary games. And by the time I could read and write, I knew that I wanted to write books, and made up my own tiny little so-called novels in sort of Woolworths exercise books, and really it's the only thing I've ever wanted to do.
Okay. Well, when did that first lead to your first writing job? How did that come
Well,
about?
my first writing job, it was a great relief because I'd had to leave school early and I had to do a secretarial course, and I was useless at it. But when I was looking in the evening paper for some sort of job that I could manage to do, I saw an advert for teenage writers. And I thought, well, I'm a teenager and I badly want to be a writer. And it was actually a magazine firm, and it was starting up a new teenage magazine, and they wanted lots and lots of new material for it. So I had a go, and unbelievably, they paid me £3 for my very first story. And then eventually they offered me a job. And so from the age of 17, I have been earning my living as a writer.
Is that how you came to write for Girls of the Tracy Beaker age group?
Well, I think I've written for all sorts of different age groups. I've written 5 crime novels for adults. I did a lot of magazine journalism. But I knew deep down that what I wanted to do more than anything else was write for children. And I've been so lucky because for the last 20, 25 years, I've concentrated on writing for children. And certainly, Tracy Beaker was my first really popular children's book. And I think my publisher said she's sold over 1 million copies so far, and certainly she's been my luckiest and my favourite.
Okay. Because you always write in the voice of a 9-year-old. Do you find that easy to do? Is that something that comes
I find
naturally?
it surprisingly easy. I don't know quite what it says about me and my maturity, but I find it much easier to write as if I were a child or a teenager maybe than I would as a middle-aged woman. I just seem to be able to think myself into the character, and it's as if I'm still a child playing my imaginary games. It just comes out the way I want it to.
Okay. And do you find the ideas come easily to you for the stories?
Ideas come easily so far, fingers crossed. Writing it down, I try very hard to make my books easy to read, but they're not always easy to write. I go through a lot of agony and worry about it and rewrite lots of bits. So by the time I finish them, it's always been a bit of a struggle. But then I'm ready to go on to the next, and then I tend to forget all the difficult times. So sometimes I'm very close to my grown-up daughter, and she might phone up and say, how's the book going? I say, oh, this one's terrible, I'm really stuck, I don't know what to do. And she always roars with laughter and she says, you're the same every single book. But at least I managed to get to the end, and then it seems to sort itself out somehow.
How do you come up with the ideas for your stories? How do you stay inspired?
I think it's not really a question of inspiration, it's a question of determination. I like writing stories, so I'm going to write them no matter what. But if I only wrote when I felt like it, I'd hardly ever write, because most mornings I don't feel like sitting down and writing. I'd much sooner read somebody else's book or go out shopping or see friends or whatever. But by the time I've forced myself to sit down at my desk, I've opened up my notebook or my computer or whatever, and I've got started, then 5 minutes in, I'm lost in the story, and that's just fine, and it just seems to work for itself then.
And the characters in your story, are they based on real life? Who are they based on particularly? Tracy Beaker?
Lots of children think that I might base my stories on real people. Sometimes they think that everything I've written about has happened to me, in which case I would have had the most terrible and deprived childhood ever. Tracy Beaker, because she's got such a strong personality, many people think she must be real. Some children feel that I have fostered a Tracy Beaker myself. Well, fun though she is to write about, I don't think I could cope with her, quite frankly. No, she just came into my head. I knew I wanted to write a story about a child desperate to be fostered. And so I thought, well, she's got to be rather a fierce, feisty sort of girl to be able to survive, to get through all the sad things that have happened to her. And she just sort of popped into my head. And it was almost as if she took over writing and she just wrote it her way, which was great.
Your stories deal with some very real issues. Is that something that's important to you?
I like to write as truthfully as I can about real life situations, even though I've made them up. And sometimes sad things happen or worrying things happen. And I try and deal with this as directly as I can, because I think children nowadays, they see all sorts of things on television. They know what happens in the real world. And I try and show that this can happen, or some adults can let you down. But I don't want to depress children utterly, and I always try very hard to have a happy ending. And even though some of my books can be quite sad, I always try and deal with things with a sense of humour and have a few jokes to ease the tension, so that I think children, a lot of children think I write funny books rather than sad books, and I think I write, it's the two things rolled into one.
It's been said that your books are responsible for changing people's perceptions of children in care and fostering. How does that make you feel?
I think that would be quite wonderful. I know some children with the whole television series of Tracy Beaker have actually thought it's kind of cool to be a child in care. And although obviously it's not a situation that any child would in real life wish to be in, it's great that perhaps it's given children more of an understanding about what it's like to be a looked after child. And maybe it's made some children feel that they're not alone in these circumstances, and that if Tracy Beaker can get through, well then maybe they can too.
Cool. You've spoken to the Queen and received an OBE. Is that your proudest achievement so far?
My proudest achievement? Do you know, I was on Blue Peter a little while ago, and I've been on Blue Peter lots of times. I think it's a lovely children's programme. I've actually been on Blue Peter once with Danny Harmer, who plays Tracy Beaker, and that was very interesting. But this last time, they presented me with a gold Blue Peter badge, and I've had the white plastic job several times over, but to get a gold one I felt really, really special. So though I've got many items of jewellery, my gold Blue Peter badge is the one I like most of all.
You mentioned Danielle there, who plays Tracy Beaker in the movie of me. Is she how you envisaged the character being on TV? I
am so lucky, because I think it's a brilliant script writing team, production team. I love it that they use Nick Sharrett's illustration as animation, and that makes everything perfect. But I think really Tracy Beaker has been such a success because Danny Harmer is just such a superb actress. And I mean, I've watched her really grow up when she's been in all the different series. And she is so brilliant. She's so professional. Children are often disappointed when I tell them that in real life Danny is not as naughty as she appears to be in Tracy. She's a brilliant actress, and I think, I mean, I've met many very good child actors, but I think Danny is one that will just last and last, and I'm so deeply grateful to her for what she's done.
Okay. You also mentioned Nick's drawings and how they're used as animations in the movie of me and the TV series. How did your relationship come about with Nick?
Well, it came about through my writing the story of Tracy Beaker, because I knew all along that I wanted the story to be as if Tracy herself were telling it. And I liked the idea of Tracy doing lots and lots of little drawings all over the text, so that as you turn the page, you just continuously saw Tracy's idea of the way everything should look. And I didn't have a clue who was going to be illustrating the book. So I just put lots of bossy instructions in the margin, sort of have Tracy doing this, have Tracy doing that. And then my publishers, they thought long and hard about it and then suggested Nick Sharratt to me. They sent me his artwork. I thought it looked wonderful. And then we had a meeting where Nick and I were both quite shy and sort of eyed each other up and down. But we just sort of hit it off. And he knew right from the start how he thought Tracy should look. And now, whenever I write a book, I don't put a single instruction in because I know Nick far better than me will visualise his characters and just bring them to life. And that's fantastic.
Out of all the books you've written, do you have a particular favourite?
I think it has to be Tracy Beaker. How could I choose anybody else?
Okay. And also you mentioned your quite fantastic jewellery collection there. And it's been said that you buy a ring every time a book's published.
I do sometimes. I missed a trick recently because I had a book published called The Diamond Girls, and that was my chance to have a great big diamond, though I don't think I could manage a diamond as big as that one. It's fun to buy rings sometimes, and just occasionally people buy me rings too. And I have a whole big box of them and sort of play around deciding which ones I'm going to put on each day. And it's also, whenever I meet children, it's fine if children are full of confidence, but sometimes they're completely struck dumb when they meet me. And I understand this because I was quite shy when I was young. And the rings are always a good talking point. And I let the children try the rings on, which amuses them. So I'm very fond of my rings.
Can you give us some insight into what you're currently working on?
I'm currently working on a book called Candy Floss, which it's going to have some fairground scenes in it. So I've just had a lovely time over a bank holiday going to a fair and going on all the rides and talking to people there and finding out for myself exactly what it's like, and indeed sampling candy floss.
Okay. I mean, in terms of talking about research, how did you go about researching the subject matter for Tracy Beaker?
I knew I had to find out quite seriously what it's like to be a child in care. And luckily for me, I have a friend who works for the Foster Care Association, and she gave me a great deal of information. And so I absorbed this, and I decided not actually to meet many actual looked after children because they might think I was writing their story, and I wanted to be free to make it up however I fancied. But since writing Tracy Beaker, I have met many children in care, and sometimes social workers might write to me and say, look, there's a specific child who's read Tracy Beaker and would really like to meet you. And so I've actually found out far more about what it's like to be in care than I actually knew when I was doing the original research.
Okay. Do you have any plans for more Tracy Beaker books?
Well, there's the story of Tracy Beaker, and then there's a sequel to that called The Dare Game. There's all the wonderful series on the BBC, and there's Mary Morris's brilliant movie of me. I don't quite know. I mean, I've been saying no to children for a while, but then you do think, I don't know, what's Tracy going to be like in her mid-teens? It might be quite tempting to write something or other else. I'll have to think about it.
Do you see Tracy living happily ever after?
I would like to think she would. I think Tracy is so determined and so forceful and so much a real personality in her own right. I feel that she is just going to spread her wings and go far, yes.
Yeah. As an author, have you coined a phrase, or do you have a motto you like to live by?
I don't really know. I think maybe the sort of message of my books is really hang on in there, and even when times get tough, you know, as long as you have a bit of courage and you try hard and you maybe live in your imagination for a bit, something will crop up somehow or other. You will sort out your problems, because although my books are known for being quite difficult books about troubling things, they're generally very positive, and I'm quite a cheery, optimistic person, and I do want children to see that even though grim things might happen, you know, this is the only life we've got. Let's make the most of it and enjoy it as best we can.
And is that the message you'd like to leave your fans?
I think so, yes. And I think certainly that would be Tracy Beaker's message, because she bounces up when even the worst things can happen to her, and yet she always the next day manages to leap out of bed full of energy, full of ideas. And I think in her own way, she's quite a good role model.
Jacqueline Wilson, thank you very much.
You will.